Most business owners are told that growth comes from doing more advertising, more content, more technology, more leads, more tactics. But what if a company's growth problem isn't a lack of activity? What if the real problem is that no one truly understands why customers make the decisions they make? Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Today's guest, Rich Smith, has spent more than 30 years answering that question from inside some very high-stakes organizations. He helped lead AIG Bank's marketing transformation during the 2008 financial crisis, rebuilt Ditech into a top 10 mortgage originator, helped scale Recovery Centers of America beyond $100 million, and contributed to the positioning of Jornaya before its 9-figure acquisition. Today, he's the founder of Rich M. Smith Growth Studio, an executive advisor, behavioral marketing strategist, angel investor, speaker, and host of the Revenue Science podcast. His work combines behavioral science, human psychology, and real-world executive experience to help leaders understand not only what works, but why it works. But this conversation isn't only about marketing. It's also about leaving the familiarity and resources of the corporate world, building an independent business around decades of experience, and discovering how your identity changes when the title, company, and infrastructure are no longer there to define you. And it all begins right now. Stick around. Rich Smith, welcome to the program. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you.
Awesome. So let's go back in our Wayback Machine, in our time machine, quite some time ago. You've spent more than 30 years in marketing and executive leadership, 3 decades. And take us back to the beginning of that journey. What first attracted you to marketing, and when did you realize that you had an instinct for understanding why people make decisions?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that I had some kind of grand plan.
Epiphany moment or something, yeah.
Yeah, and I really didn't. In fact, I don't know too many people that have, done it like that. For me, look, I started as a engineering major in undergrad at Penn State. I was good in math and science, and I thought, I was going to be a chemical engineer. I happened to spend a summer working in an engineering firm and realized that was not the life for me.
Not gonna do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I changed my major to economics, and as part of that search for, okay, well, what am I going to do with this degree? I mean, I really liked the study of economics. I liked the field a lot. I ended up doing a 1-week internship during my junior year. It was at spring break. All of my fraternity brothers were in Venezuela or New Orleans at Mardi Gras or doing something fun. I happened to be in Newark, Delaware, at this little company called MBNA America, which happened to be kind of a spinoff from Maryland National Bank, and they started a credit card company, and they sponsored the Penn State credit card where I was going to school. So I spent a week there, and really the subject matter was all marketing. Like it was, I had to do a presentation at the end of the week. I presented to, I didn't know it at the time, but pretty much the entire senior leadership of the company was in the room. And then after that, I got a job offer for a summer internship in the marketing department. And that's kind of where it all began. And I've been in the field ever since. And I think what's kept me there is it's definitely the science behind it, as well as the art, right? Marketing is really both. It's a science and it's an art. And that really appeals to me because I like both sides of that, right? And I think what really appealed to me, I didn't even have a word for it at the time when I started my career, but what really appealed to me was trying to figure out how and why people make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And why would, we did a lot of direct mail at MBNA America. I don't know if direct mail is still there. It's taken a long, slow death.
Yes.
But we did a lot of direct mail, and you can change a word on an envelope. You could change the color. You could change the paper. You could change the length of the letter inside and where things were positioned. And all of those little changes drove different behavior
Yeah.
amongst the audience that was receiving it. Why? Or why would a word, why would a color, what would make the difference, right? And so that was fascinating to me. And I think that really kept me in the field. And it wasn't until much later that I actually, that the research and the science kind of caught up with it. And the whole field of behavioral economics was launched in around 2007. So it's only maybe 20 years old.
Which has made its
And
way into algorithms today, right?
yeah,
I imagine the
absolutely.
people at Meta and all the other online sources they probably have behavioral scientists, neuroscientists on staff that figure that out.
100% they do. And, there are large agencies that do that. It was kind of, Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, was published in 2007. He's largely considered the grandfather of behavioral economics. And really from that point on, as I started to learn more about it, that gave me the framework to understand those effects that I had been seeing and kind of instinctually absorbing and using in my career.
You've worked in several highly competitive, heavily regulated industries, including banking, mortgage lending, healthcare, insurance, technology. How did moving between those industries shape the way you think about customers, risk, and growth?
It was really the commonalities. I mean, yes, they seem to be, they are, and don't seem to be, they're very different industries with a lot of different challenges. But, what hangs them all together, and I think this is what I've found, even working as a management consultant, where today, I work with lots of different companies in a lot of different industries, is you're still selling to humans.
Exactly. That's the common
And
denominator.
right. You're still selling to humans. And, it really, and honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's B2B or B2C or B2B2C, you're still selling to humans. I think that's, maybe we'll come to this later, undervalued in the B2B world. I think a lot of,
Right.
B2B companies assume that their buyers are rational and are ROI driven. And the reality is that they're not. They're just like any other consumer. We make decisions based on emotion and then rationalize them later. And that's the way the B2B world operates. So it's really, that's what kind of hung it together for me, was understanding, all right, okay, I have a different product, I have a different service, from one company to the next, but the human beings are still making those buying decisions. And how are we going to position our products, position our services, our go-to-market strategy in a way that is intentional around how our brains work and how we make decisions.
Yeah. You were leading marketing for AIG during the 2008 financial crisis. I cannot think of a worse time to try and put on a brave face and find customers during that time, because the entire world blamed all those financial institutions for what was happening, or rightly or
Yeah,
wrongly.
yeah,
What was it like trying to protect a company, reassure customers, and continue making decisions while the entire financial system appeared to be coming apart?
yeah. There was certainly an interesting time. I remember the weekend that the news came out about Bear Stearns and AIG. It was, I forget the date, but it was a weekend in early September. And I happened to be at an American Bankers Association conference out in Denver when the news broke. And so I'm walking around with this badge that says AIG on it, and you
Yeah.
would have thought I
Might
had
as well
some
be a
kind of
target.
yeah, you think I had some kind of disease, because people would see the badge and go, "Oh, well, I'm sorry," and kind of
Yeah.
back away like it's catching, right?
Yeah, right.
And I wasn't sure whether like my corporate card would work to get me home from Denver. It was that kind of situation.
Well, if you
But
were with Bear Stearns, your corporate card would not have worked, because I think
right,
I think
yeah, no,
their
yeah,
history.
yeah. Yeah. So I made it home, and I was the chief marketing officer of AIG Bank at the time. We were a highly regulated financial institution, not the source of AIG's problems, but we were the regulated entity that gave the federal government the legal ability to come into AIG and do the bailout.
Yeah.
So I was really at ground zero. There were days when I would come to work and wonder whether the regulators were going to padlock the door and I wouldn't be able to get in. It was pretty intense. And I think in a situation like that, you get to try things that you wouldn't otherwise get to try. And because it's almost like, well, we have to give it a shot, or, we're going to go under, right? We're going to fail. And the main issue that we were dealing with was, prior to the financial crisis at the bank, we really didn't go direct to consumer. We went through other AIG entities and cross-sold our banking products to AIG customers of our financial advisors,
So your
our
employer was
insurance
also your
agents.
customer.
Right. And so now the company is being broken up. Different units are being sold off. So our source of business was disappearing overnight.
Yeah.
And, we had an independent board, as any bank has to, and we were challenged by the board and the regulators to say, okay, well, what are you guys going to do to stay solvent? That task fell to me. And and a lot of AIG units had rebranded because they were just running from the name, because the name, they felt kind of toxic. I mean,
Yep.
when you're on the news every single night and everybody's blaming you for what's
you're not going
going
to see an
on.
energy company called Enron 2 anytime soon. Right. It's the same thing.
We get executives getting death threats, right? I mean,
Right.
it was bad. But you kind of learn that, what, there's what the media is saying, and then there's the reality.
Yeah.
And they're often not the same thing.
Yeah.
And the what the media is saying is often sensationalized, oversimplified. It was a very complex problem. I'm not even sure, I was in the middle of it. I'm not even sure that I completely understand it today. Exactly what went wrong financially, because it was pretty complicated. But what was not complicated was our path out. And I think this is a really, really important lesson, one that I've taken and I talk about a good bit, and that is, transparency equals trust. And for AIG to make its way out of that pit that we were in, prior to the financial crisis, we were a $1 trillion company and nobody knew who we were.
Right.
After the financial crisis.
Yeah, you're not Wells Fargo or B of A, right.
Yeah. We used to complain that, like, why is our brand awareness so low? We're this massive company and we have no brand amongst consumers. Well, the blow up fixed that overnight.
Yeah.
Everybody knew who we were.
Yeah.
But our like positivity ratings were very, very low. I mean, our favorability was very, very low. But what we did was, look, we got very public with, hey, here's what we're going to do to get out of this situation. Here are the milestones. And when a milestone would come, we would report on it. And, it came down to saying what you were going to do and doing what you said.
Yeah.
And being transparent about it. If we ever missed a milestone, we were transparent about that and transparent about why. And that, over time, it wasn't a quick fix, but over time that rebuilt trust in the marketplace. Yeah. And, eventually the AIG brand was rehabilitated, and, it's a powerful brand in the insurance world still today.
Yeah, the public, I think generally we underestimate the public. The public can handle bad news. It can't handle incorrect news. It can't handle.
Yeah, absolutely. That. And when you got down to the question of, well, should we rebrand or not? And as I said, several AIG units did. My strategy to take the bank forward was to go direct to consumer. We didn't have the ability to go build branches overnight, right? We had to find sources of deposits, and we had to do it quickly. And it was a difficult decision. Should we rebrand or not?
Yeah.
I chose not. And for the very reason you just said, and that is, I had the feeling that the kind of people who would trust us and deposit money with us were sophisticated,
Yeah.
Sophisticated in financial terms, and they would understand that actually AIG probably was a very safe place to put your money
Right.
right now.
And if you did
Because of the
rebrand, the public
regulatory
would
scrutiny.
know you were formerly AIG, and they would think you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. I look at the Tylenol
Right.
scandal from several years ago. I'm sure there was discussions in that boardroom. Should we change the name from Tylenol to, headache gone or something? But they stuck with it because not only do humans, not only can they appreciate bad news, not appreciate, but understand it and forgive it. They have long memories in some regards, and they have very short memories in other regards. And
Right.
you just have to kind of, you know, eat what's given to you and make the best of it, and not repeat whatever happened before. You
Right.
also
And I
work
think,
with, huh?
sorry, I was just going to add your Tylenol story is very similar in a lot of ways. In their case, they didn't create the problem.
No, it was some
Somebody was
whack job.
poisoning their
Yeah,
product, but they took responsibility for it. They, hey, we're in the business of providing medicines to people. We can't let them have negative effects,
yeah,
right? Even if it's not our fault.
right.
They pulled it. They were very transparent about it. They were transparent about their path back. And, today it's still a powerhouse brand.
Yeah, I feel bad for Taco Bell right now because it turned out their source of lettuce was that company that had all the parasites in it, and it's not their fault. They bought from a trusted vendor that's been around a long time, from what I understand, and that happens. But yeah, it's a scandal of the day. You also worked with a company that I remember very well, Ditech. I think they were called Ditech Funding or something back in the day. And they
Yeah.
were as omnipresent an advertiser as Capital One is today. They were everywhere. And you couldn't watch a television show without a Ditech commercial or a radio program without a Ditech commercial. And you helped revive a brand that had been dormant for several years. In fact, I didn't even notice it went away until I read your bio and did some research on you. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that name. I just assumed they weren't around anymore. And
Yeah.
you helped their revival. And not only that, but built it into a top 10 mortgage originator, which is pretty impressive to come back from the perceived grave. What did that experience teach you about bringing a familiar brand back to life without simply trying to recreate its past?
Yeah, I think in a way, my experience at AIG set me up nicely for the task that I had at Ditech. Again, we had a brand that had been a powerhouse brand, as you just mentioned, in the early 2000s, up until about the financial crisis, at the time of the financial crisis. And at that point, GMAC, who owned both the GMAC brand and the Ditech brand, decided to mothball the Ditech brand because it had some association, a mistaken association, but some association with subprime lending. So they put the brand on a shelf, right? Years later, GMAC now changes their name to AIG Bank,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
and they want to sell the mortgage company. So in 2013, they sold the mortgage company, but they weren't selling the rights to use the GMAC brand because they didn't want
Right.
that floating around in the market.
Yeah.
Right. So the buyer, this investment management company that bought Ditech, bought the rights to the Ditech brand at the same time. I was hired about 30, 45 days after the sale to come in as the chief marketing officer and bring that brand back to life. And one of the first things that I had to do was determine, what kind of baggage does this brand have?
Right. What are you up against?
Is it so bad that we just can't do it? Or is it, yeah, it's got a little bit of negative baggage, but you know what it has that's a real strong asset, which was the same asset that I had at AIG? It was a retained memory of the
Yeah.
brand.
Yeah.
People remembered it.
Yep.
So I decided, okay, well, my options are I can change the name and try to build a new brand name from scratch. That's going to be really expensive and take a really long time. Or I can leverage that retained memory that was out there and redefine who and what we are using that retained memory. And so that's the approach that we took. And interestingly, I applied in doing the kind of positioning research. I took a page out of the politician's playbook. Politicians, when they do political research, they kind of break everybody down into three categories, right? You have your base. These are the people that are going to come out and vote for you no matter what you do or say.
Yep.
You have your opposition. These are people who will never vote for you.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you say to them or what you promise them, they will not vote for you. And in the middle, you have the swing, the persuadable audience. Well, I took that same approach to repositioning the Ditech brand and looking at, okay, who would buy from us? And it was a small population, but there was a population of people that would buy from us no matter what we said. There was a bigger population of people, but still not huge, that would not consider us at all. And then there was a persuadable middle, a swing, if you will. And we analyzed, okay, what is going to drive action amongst that swing voter or swing consumer, right? And that's how we repositioned the brand, was to directly speak to that persuadable audience in the middle. And that was a key to, bringing it back and growing it to the point where we did.
Yeah, that was impressive. You also did something similar with Recovery Centers of America and kind of brought them back to life. After years of holding major executive positions, you founded Rich M. Smith Growth Studio. I get the name. I get your name in there, obviously, but Growth Studio. I like that. I like that name a lot. What made you leave the structure and resource of the corporate world? What were you thinking? What were you smoking? What were you drinking when you thought you're going to start signing the front of the check instead of the back of the check?
Yeah, and I was thinking I just needed more gray hair.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Grecian
like that.
formula. There's a brand you can bring back. Yeah.
I'm a strong believer that the act of founding companies and entrepreneurship is the engine that drives a lot of our human progress. It's that creation and bringing new products and services, life-saving medical devices, new software, new technology, bringing that to all of us is what kind of pushes us forward as a species, right? As the human race. Really, really powerful engine. And, what I was finding is that a lot of organizations, founder-led companies, had great products, good people, good service, but they would fail. And they would fail not because, they didn't have great stuff. They would fail because they never really figured out how to take it to market and how to position their organization in a way that would attract their target buyer and how to actually systematize that, because there is a system to it. And so that's what really drove me to launch the Growth Studio, was just having the opportunity to work with organizations like that and in my own small way kind of change their trajectory and make sure that some of those great products do actually make it to market and thrive.
Yeah. When you first became an entrepreneur, what, if anything, surprised you most about the difference between being responsible for a company's marketing and being responsible for your entire business?
Yeah, I'd say, when you're in the corporate world, at a senior level, you do have some latitude to act, on your own volition, if you will. But there is still a very strong, direction that the organization is going and the governance around it. And, you have a board of directors, you've got CEO and leadership team, right? You've got regulators in many cases that are directing your activity. So what you need to accomplish is relatively clear. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's a blank sheet of paper, right?
Yeah.
And that can be terrifying, frankly, right? Blank sheet of paper, no boundaries. You can do anything,
Which is
that
a gift
really
and a
scary.
curse. It's a gift and a curse all
Exactly.
in one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. There are no guardrails up. You've said that most companies don't fail because they lack ideas. They fail because they don't understand why people buy. What are business leaders most likely to misunderstand about the customer decision-making process?
Well, it's a little bit about what we talked about earlier, and that is, I think a lot of people assume that buyers are rational. And the reality is we're not rational. We are kind of feeling machines that think occasionally. And we tend to make decisions based on emotion and then rationalize them later and tell ourselves that there's a rational reason why we made that decision. And I think a lot of organizations mistakenly structure their marketing and sales communications processes, et cetera, under the belief that their buyers are rational. Hey, we've got a better software product than all of our other competitors, so people are just going to buy it because it's clearly better. And the reality is that doesn't happen. People, again, for that same reason, people make decisions based on emotion, rationalize them later. And so what you have to do is recognize that and structure your go-to-market strategy in a way that that allows your target audience to engage with you, because you're speaking to them on terms that resonate with them at an emotional level. When you think about a sales process, well, it starts with a buyer engaging with you at some level. Saw you at a trade show, or saw a news article about you, right? Came to your website, began to look at what you're doing. At that stage, you've got to win the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, like, you got to win the heart and then win the mind. So when your first contact with a potential buyer is really, like, if you're leading with ROI charts and features and all the great things that your product does and getting into that kind of detail, you're going to lose them. At that point, it's all about emotion. What's in it for them? Why should they care about this? Right? What is the pain or fear that our product or service solves in their lives? And that's how you get them engaged. And then once they're engaged, now you start to give rational reasons why they should continue with the buying process, right? That's winning the mind. But you don't get the chance to do that unless you've won the heart first.
Yeah, we discovered that. We used to be, I've had my company now for 34 years, and we used to be obnoxious, braggadocious, chest-thumping advertisers. Our ads were just a little bit short of "we're the best, everyone else sucks." And we threw specs out and stuff it was like taking a Velcro ball and throwing it against just a regular flat wall. There was no hook. It landed on deaf ears. And then we got tired of the sound of our own voice, and we switched radically. There's a few events that happened, and we said, okay, we're done. We'll just walk away from this crazy rat race of so-called marketing. And we switched to a process that I coined. I coin things, I come up with phrases, and I find out the phrases are already out there. So it's not originated with me, but I called it conscious marketing, where we sell through providing value. We sell through education. We sell by not talking about what we sell. We don't talk about us. We connect with our customer, which are all scientists and engineers and things like that in the space I'm in. We connect with them by identifying a problem we know they're struggling with and talking about not our products, but best practice solutions. And then another thing I coined, which I think has already been coined before me, this process of guided discovery. If they come to the conclusion on their own through facts and data, accurate facts and data, that, oh my gosh, yes, this is what we need to start doing. Who does that? Oh, wait a minute, you guys do that. They will fall on their sword. And I believe strongly that, particularly with younger generations, millennials, Gen Zers, and whatever the next ones are, they don't just become a customer. They join a tribe. Apple proved that many years ago. A little less so today, but how many people do you see? Hundreds of people camping for 3 days in front of the Apple store, hoping to get the next version of the iPhone that has 2 megapixels more than the last version, but they want to be early adopters. And Patagonia and Nike, Nike is a great example of what you're talking about. Name me a single ad that Nike has run that you can remember that talks about the comfort of their shoe, arch support, style, grippiness. None. A lot of their ads don't even show a shoe, or you can't really tell it's their shoe. They show Michael Jordan. They celebrate athleticism. And not only do people buy their shoes, they buy the swoosh on a ball cap or a hoodie. And that's not what they're known for. They're known for their shoe company, for goodness sake. And they created this whole atmosphere where people identify with Nike, and then they buy their shoes because they want to be part of the tribe. And I think that's what you have also discovered, that when you provide value and education and stop selling your soul, you become an authority in their mind. And once you become an authority, you become an influencer. And I hate that word because it's been hijacked by the Kardashians of the world. But you become an influencer, but an authority-based influencer, not a celebrity and TikTok twerky influencer, a real authority-based influencer. And you cannot buy that kind of marketing. You cannot throw enough specs out to make people go, oh my God, I want to wear their merch. It doesn't happen through specs. It happens through respect. It happens through trust. It happens through an earned process of becoming an authority. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. And I think the most successful entrepreneurs that I've come into contact with are very problem focused, not solution focused. Mm-hmm. They love the problem. They figure out the problem that their early adopters have, and they work the problem. As opposed to, I think what many entrepreneurs do is they come up with a solution and they get tied to that solution. The solution is the product or the service that they're creating, right? The software package, the device, the new product, right? And they that's their baby. And the trap there is that people don't buy solutions, right? They don't buy. What they buy is a way to eliminate a problem, or like the example you just gave with Nike. What is someone really buying there? Because there are a lot of people out there that are wearing Nike branded stuff that are not athletic at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What are they buying?
I'm looking down to see what shoes I'm wearing right now. Yeah. Right? No, I'm okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm not throwing stones at you by any chance.
No, I don't take it that way. But you're right.
Yeah, they're buying status, right? They're buying status. They're buying belonging. They're buying entry into a tribe, and community is what they're buying, and contact with other humans.
Yeah,
right? That's what they're actually buying. You can just. We could probably sit here for 5 hours talking about brands that do that really well. Another one is Red Bull. Okay? Yeah. If you look at
extreme sports, and they're selling an energy drink.
They're selling cars and planes, and they're selling fizzy soda water.
Yeah, they're selling sugar water with extra caffeine.
With a lot of caffeine in it.
At the end of the day, you're right. But they created a whole illusion's too strong a word. Illusion sounds like they're pranking people, but it was this illusion of fitting in. of, if I'm wearing a Red Bull thing, if I'm drinking Red Bull, people must think I'm into that lifestyle.
I'm super cool, like those extreme athletes.
Yeah, I don't have to jump out of planes for people to think I jump out of planes. All I have to do is drink
Red Bull,
toxic water.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about neuroscience and behavioral, studies and things like that. You frequently explore cognitive biases. And some of these that I've learned from you are new to me, such as anchoring, sunk cost thinking, the halo effect, and survivorship bias. Which bias causes entrepreneurs to make the most damaging business decisions, and why is it so difficult for them to recognize it themselves?
Yeah, I would say probably the most, and there are a lot of candidates for what's the most damaging.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I think one that I see a lot is confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And what confirmation bias basically means is you form an opinion about something, and then you seek data that supports your opinion, and selectively ignore any information that is contrary to your opinion.
Yeah, it's a big problem in the medical community. And
it's a problem for all of us, right?
Yeah.
But I think with entrepreneurs, it can get particularly damaging because they think they've got this great idea for a product, and they invest some of their own money. They go recruit other investors, people to put money into the business. They raise capital, and they're so sure that they've got a great solution that they tend to ignore anything that might indicate that there's a problem, or anything that might indicate that that solution maybe isn't as great, or maybe needs to be tailored to a slightly different audience or brought to market in a different way. They ignore a lot of that. And I think that leads to, that's kind of the root cause of a lot of failure amongst startups and small businesses, is not seeking out evidence that's contrary to the opinions that you might already have.
Yeah. What happens when a founder becomes emotionally attached? I've been there many, many times, to a product or a message or an employee or a strategy that the evidence says is no longer working. It's part of that bias thing. How do you help that leader separate perseverance from destructive stubbornness?
Yeah, and that's, again, I guess maybe partly the sunk cost fallacy as well, too. I think a lot of times you're like, well, I've invested so much in this action or this product or this strategy or this person that if I just invest a little bit more, we're going to get there. Right. And not thinking about the fact that everything that you did yesterday is in the past, and you can't change that. And, those are all sunk costs. It's really, how do you make the best decision that you can make with what I have in front of me today? I think, another thing is, hey, we're humans. And as human beings, like we have a hard time letting go of things. Right. There's another kind of pernicious cognitive bias called the endowment effect, which basically means that we tend to overvalue what we have and undervalue what we don't have. And you can see examples of this, right? People who are trying to sell something on eBay for the first time will almost always price it like way overprice what someone else is willing to pay for it.
Right.
Because like, hey, I've got this thing, it's great. Someone should want to pay, a lot for it because I bought it when it was new and it was really expensive. But, the reality is like that's the endowment effect working on you, right? If you were on the other side and you were going to buy that used product off of eBay, you wouldn't pay anywhere near what you want to offer it for.
Right. Right.
Okay, well, the same happens to entrepreneurs. What's the answer you usually get?
25x multiple. Yes, exactly.
Right. Something like that. Or, I often hear 6 to 10 or 6 to 8 is a lot of what I hear. And you never hear someone say, well, it's really worth like 2 times EBITDA. Right?
Yeah.
Never hear that. Right. It's always some big multiple. And, I think that endowment effect and that kind of that cognitive bias probably drives a lot of ineffective strategy and drives a lot of poor decisions, particularly around exits, because they feel like it should be worth a lot more than someone else thinks it's worth.
Yeah.
And that causes the, founders to hold on to the company too long. It causes them to not make good decisions around how to exit and who to exit to, who to sell to. It's another difficult one.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your company, the Growth Studio. Who do you serve? What types of industries do you serve? And what types of services do you offer to help their growth?
Happy to. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, we're kind of like a Y Combinator, but for founder-led B2B service businesses. So we will work with startups, but usually we're working with organizations that are a little bit further along in their path. And what I found, and a lot of what we've talked about today, is that entrepreneurs that can go from 0 to 1, that's great. But it's the problem of going 1 to 100 where they often get stuck. And that's where we step in and help. Because typically what got you to have some product market fit and traction in the marketplace and get some customers, likely get to be cash flow positive. Maybe you don't need capital anymore, but still not growing at the pace that you want to grow at, that's going to get you to that big exit. So they stall, right? They can get to the point where they've got traction in the marketplace and potentially cash flow positive, and maybe have product market fit or be close to having product market fit, and they think that that's just going to work in perpetuity to grow their company
because it worked in the past.
Because it worked in the past. Yeah. The problem is what got you here won't get you there usually. Right? Yeah. The tactics that'll take you from 0 to 1 are not the same tactics that take you from 1 to 100. And you can get to from 0 to 1 largely, many times flying by the seat of your pants.
Sure, that's what I did.
Got lucky.
Yeah.
The founders involved in everything, like they're in every sales call, they're making every marketing decision, they're running finance, they're making every hiring decision, right? Well, that doesn't scale.
Right.
Because that is dependent upon the amount of time that the founder has.
Yep.
And they can't scale their company until they scale themselves.
Yeah, it's like owning a restaurant with 3 tables. You're going to sell out every night, but you're never going to be able to triple, quadruple, 10x your revenue. Because at some point you can't charge that much.
Example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I had my magic wand, and my magic wand, I called it a magic wand. It was just, I was very persuasive. I could will things to happen at my company. I could put out every fire easily. And those were all fires I started. I was both the arsonist and the firefighter at my company. And one day I went into the office and waved my magic wand, and it's not working. And that's when I came to the realization, quite the hard way, that what got me from A to B is going to fail me from B to C. And if you think about when you start a brand new company, I bootstrapped a company. I started at my garage. Now we sell on 6 continents, but in the day I started out of my garage, and it was really easy to get to 1. It was pretty easy to get to 2 or 3, and I completely ran out of skill. I was basically driving a car in first gear. That was my number one trait, was first gear. Lots of torque, lots of highly leveraged. Transmission spins at several thousand RPM, and you're doing 12 miles an hour. Easy. You can't run in first gear for very long. You can't go far. You can't go fast without damaging the engine and ruining the car. And the same applies to a company. I think that when companies start to grow, when they start to scale beyond the growth and scale of the founder, that's when the founder becomes less of a propeller and more of an anchor. And it's really difficult to get a founder to realize they need help. they either need to learn new skills, which I had to learn, and those I couldn't learn or didn't want to learn, I had to acquire them through, very strategic hiring. And it messes with the founder's head. It messes with their ego because, people who start companies generally have some ego or some arrogance or some naivety. I had all that. And because 80% of businesses fail statistically, what makes me think I'm special, right? So, I think those are perfect first gear traits, but they are toxic much past, the first year or two. And
yeah, it's a great metaphor. I love the first gear metaphor. I may actually steal that from you.
You're welcome to
I'll
it.
try to remember to give you credit. That's a really good one, and I think it kind of perfectly paints the picture, right? You're in first gear, and you can get started in first gear. In fact, you need to be in first gear to get started.
Yeah.
But you can't go fast.
You can't go fast. You can't go far.
You can't accelerate, right?
Yeah.
And so when a founder gets into that situation, what's usually lacking is they have not built systems around what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, entrepreneurs are great problem solvers.
Yeah,
and
we MacGyver our way out of everything.
Right. Love to solve problems. Love to get involved in solving every problem. Where they tend not to think is in what I would call systems thinking. Right? How do you systematize what you do so that you don't have to do it anymore?
Right.
One thing I'll often ask a founder is, well, what happens if you don't go to work for 6 weeks? Would your company survive? Usually the answer is no.
Yeah.
I mean, with the companies that I work with, it's usually no.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, if your company, and you want to sell your company eventually, right? Yeah. Okay. Do you think the investor is going to think that you're going to stick around after they buy it?
Yeah. They're going to give you a pile of cash and you're going to stay? Yeah.
Right. Everything depends on you. Then you don't have a saleable business.
That's right. That's going to lower the multiple.
Right. That kind of, now that starts to make sense to people, and they get the fact that, okay, what you're doing is figuring out how do you do only the things that you're great at and basically replace yourself everywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first day you start a company, the first goal is to work yourself out of a job, right? And that's the last thing. That was the last thing on my mind. I had zero, even the concept of an exit strategy. I had a product I wanted the world to have, and getting out was never part of the strategy. So, I kind of hung on with my claws a little too long. But fortunately, the business gods took mercy on me. I think I made them laugh. I think I made so many bonehead mistakes, I humored them. But if you can last and figure it out and get smart and seek assistance, like a good mentor or a good coach, in your case, I think that is a very, very smart move. Last question, because we're about out of time. There's two measurements of time. There's time, and then there's podcast time. And I'm sure you're well aware of how fast things go when you're having conversations like this. How did you define success early in your career, and how do you define it today?
Yeah, I think early in my career, when I was young and let's say, in my 20s, success was largely about climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
Right. And getting and more, right. More. Right?
Mm-hmm.
More cars, house, right.
Yeah.
Bigger jobs, bigger paychecks. And that, I think, was how I defined success at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think with a little bit more experience, I realize that, more is not like getting on that hedonic treadmill is not really the answer to having a happy life, right? That's an answer to constantly striving, for more. And so, today, I think of success more around, am I fulfilling my potential? Am I living up to the things that I really care about and the values that I have? Am I helping people? Again, that's part of why I'm not in the corporate world anymore and I'm doing what I'm doing is because I feel like, okay, I can help one company if I'm their chief marketing officer. But doing what I'm doing today, I can help lots of companies through, working with them directly or through, things like this, being on this interview or running my own podcast or, the articles that I write, like putting that kind of thought out into the world that can help people. So that's really how I measure success today. Am I having an impact amongst, the audience that I care about?
And part of that impact is your podcast. Tell me I forget what the name of the podcast is.
It's called Revenue Science, and it's really about, how you engineer predictable, sustainable growth.
And you interview subject matter experts, or is this more of a Rich Smith dialogue?
No. So I almost always have a guest. In fact, I shouldn't say almost. I've only ever done them with guests, and my guests are usually, oftentimes, they're CEOs that are scaling their businesses or have had multiple exits, and we get into what their experience was and lessons that they have that they wish they had known earlier that they can pass along to the founders and CEOs that are in our audience. And then I'd say maybe the other 30% of my guests are they're subject matter experts. So it might be an expert in pricing or product positioning, or I've had behavioral science experts on the podcast. So that's kind of the mix.
Yeah. Well, for my audience who'd like to get more information on Rich M. Smith Growth Studio and links to the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, right down here below me, it says see more. Click that link and that'll take you to the appropriate URLs. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, by all means, go to that podcast app, look at the show notes, and all that information will be there as well. Rich Smith, thank you.
Great.
So much for the generosity of your time. I've had you on here for a while. I really appreciate the depth of your knowledge, particularly in behavioral science. I find that fascinating, how people work. Thanks for sharing your journey with me and all the sage advice. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Mike. I've really enjoyed talking with you today, and I hope that, like my last comment, I hope that what we've talked about will help some people in your audience.
I am absolutely confident it will. Well, continued success to you, my friend, and I hope our paths cross again.
Thank you, you too.
All right, here are some final thoughts. Rich's career demonstrates that growth isn't created by collecting more tactics or chasing every new trend. It begins with understanding people, identifying what genuinely sets businesses apart, and creating a strategy that leaders can explain, trust, and execute consistently. He also showed that experience inside large organizations can become the foundation for entrepreneurship. But making that transition requires more than expertise. It requires the willingness to leave behind the title, the infrastructure, and the perceived security of the corporate world and discover whether the value you created inside those companies can stand on its own. Perhaps the most important lesson from today's conversation is that marketing shouldn't feel like magic. Entrepreneurs may never remove every uncertainty from growing a business, but when they understand why customers decide, why teams resist, and why leaders sometimes cling to failing ideas, they can replace guesswork with intention. Now, that is a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And don't forget to check out my newest series, Reluctant Lessons, When Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the story behind it all. We've already profiled several companies with many more on the way. As it turns out, there's no shortage. Check out Reluctant Lessons on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether that's by choice or by circumstance, remember this: sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. That's it for me. I'm all out of time. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll see you again soon.